Only 2 more days until we begin a new year, a new decade. Now, there are some people who believe the decade of the 20s begins January 1st, 2021. Now, the debate over when one decade ends and another begins has raged for years. Why? Well, here's our why guy, all new this morning.
We've had the roaring 20s and the swinging 60s. The 1970s will forever be remembered for leisure suits and disco. As tastes and fashions change, it seems we always have the great decade debate. Some are convinced that 2021 begins a new decade. Others argue it happened January 1st of 2020. So let's explore why there's disagreement over when one decade ends and another begins. The most popular opinion belongs to those who believe a decade begins with years ending in 0. 64% of the people responding to a survey by YouGov.com believe that's the case.
When we talk about the 60s, the 70s, the 90s, we're really referring to the period that begins with the 0.
17% of the people responding to that survey believe a decade begins in a year ending in 1, like 2021. Janice Stillman of the Farmer's Almanac tells us it all goes back to a 6th century monk named DIONYSIUS EXIGUUS, whose work led to the creation of the Gregorian calendar we now use.
He started with year 1. He was using Roman numerals, and there was no 0 in the Roman numerals. So he started with year 1.
So some argue since our calendar's first decade began with a 1, all decades should begin with the 1. The folks at the National Institute of Standards and Technology tell us there's no wrong answer. Andrew Novick does research work there and tells me a decade is any period covering 10 years. Whether you think the new decade begins this year, next year, or last year, it may be the one time when we're all right.
I think I'm more confused now than ever. If you got a question for Jerry Carnes, our why guy, send it to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email.